This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 807 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Before getting into the trends this week, I want to send another reminder to check out lateround.com. You can sign up for the Late Round Fantasy Football newsletter. It's absolutely free. You can join the Patreon for things like rest of season rankings and live Q&As. You can purchase this year's prospect guide or draft guide. Head to lateround.com to learn more. Let's get to these trends. The first trend this week is about Derrick Henry. He scored just 2 PPR points in week 3, his lowest point total in a game where he's carried the ball at least 10 times. So far this season, Henry's averaging 3.2 yards per rush. His previous career low came in 2017 when he ran for a 4.2 yards per rush rate. According to Pro Football Focus, Henry's averaging just 2.73 yards after contact per attempt. In 2022, that number was 3.6. In 2021, 3.28. In 2020, it was 3.85. This offensive line is a problem, and in week 3, it faced one of its toughest matchups on the year against the Browns. But Henry's now been out-snapped by Tyjae Spears in 2 of 3 games this season. That's thanks to these negative game scripts. That combined with worse efficiency is why he's off to a slower start here in 2023. The Washington Commanders faced a serious negative game script in week 3 against Buffalo. They had a negative game script in week 2 against Denver, but it wasn't like this. They were trailing by 10 points in the first quarter and they lost 37-3. In that game against the Bills, Brian Robinson was effective. He had 70 yards on the ground, but it was only on 10 carries. He saw 83% of Washington's running back rushes, but he was held to 0 targets. Meanwhile, Antonio Gibson saw 5 targets on 28 routes run, and he outsnapped Robinson 32-19. Gibson even fumbled in that game again, and he was still seeing more looks than Robinson, at least from a snap perspective. Now, things could change, but it seems clear that Gibson is the receiving back in that offense. And that could be trouble for Brian Robinson. He could get game scripted out. It's something to monitor moving forward. Sam Laporta is an absolute monster. He's now finished as a top 8 tight end in all 3 weeks this season in PPR formats. He caught at least 5 balls in every game. Only Zach Ertz has seen a higher target share at the tight end position. Not only is he a tight end 1 moving forward, but he's pacing to break basically every rookie receiving record. You have to just throw him in your lineup until he gives us a reason to not throw him in your lineup. Now, I had Jordan Love as a sell last week, and that was looking pretty good until the final 10 minutes of their game against the Saints. But I do think that if someone in your league thinks he's going to be a top 4, top 5 quarterback in fantasy from here on out, which is where he's at right now, you should still sell. Now, the odd thing is, compared to consensus rest of season rankings, I'm actually now higher on Love than other analysts. But I do think that if people are buying his current ranking, he's a sell. And here's why. So far in 2023, quarterbacks have thrown a touchdown pass for every 177 yards through the air. Yards correlate to touchdowns. So this is a quick and easy way to spot regression. Jordan Love has thrown a touchdown pass on every 93.6 passing yards so far this year. Green Bay has 9 touchdowns to start the season. 7 of those 9 have come through the air. 1 of the 2 on the ground also went to Jordan Love. That type of ratio is higher than what we typically see. Combine that with how frequently Love is throwing touchdowns, and it's obvious he's going to regress to some degree, even when Christian Watson is healthy. The key here, though, is that regression doesn't mean irrelevancy. I thought Justin Fields was the better upside play rest of season. I talked about that last week. That's not the case for me anymore. Even with this regression, Love to me is a low-end QB1. I just don't know if that's saying much. Now, speaking of how teams are scoring touchdowns, let's talk about Minnesota. Yes, they have a high pass rate, but even with that high pass rate, we wouldn't expect only passing touchdowns to come from that offense. So far this year, they have 9 passing touchdowns and 0 rushing touchdowns. I have a formula that I built last year that shows expected passing touchdown rate. Basically, it tells us what type of pass to rush touchdown ratio we'd expect from a team based on how often they're throwing the ball. A team running the ball a lot would skew more towards rushing touchdowns and vice versa. Minnesota has the highest pass rate this season. And based on that pass rate, we'd expect 83% of their touchdowns to come via the pass. They're at 100% right now. So regression is coming. I mentioned how bad Denver's defense has been this year on the 15 Transaction Show like multiple times, but get this. After Week 3's game, Denver's now allowed 16 offensive touchdowns this season. Chicago's next on that list with 11 touchdowns allowed. On the flip side, all the way at the top, you've got the Cleveland Browns. They've given up just one offensive touchdown this year. It was that big play to George Pickens. Cleveland's now top 10 in touchdowns allowed, sack rate, pressure rate, and passing EPA per dropback allowed. They've got tough matchups upcoming against the Ravens and 49ers. But this defense is legit. Denver's, not so much. One pleasant surprise this season is Jimmy Garoppolo. I know that sounds weird. I don't think he's been amazing. It's just that for fantasy football, he hasn't been horrible for his pass catchers. Jimmy G and the Raiders currently have the 5th highest air yards per attempt rate in football. Garoppolo's actually thrown at 15 plus air yards at the 2nd highest rate in the league. Devontae Adams is going to get his, but Jacoby Myers has been really good to start the year too. It's good news for them that Garoppolo has been pushing it down the field. I don't think enough people are talking about Kyren Williams' usage. According to Fantasy Life's utilization report, no running back in football has had a better route participation to start the year than Kyren Williams. On top of that, Williams has now had back-to-back games with a 100% running back rush share, meaning he's seen all of the Rams running back rushes for 2 straight games. Just for some context, we've only had 5 of those types of games this year. Kyren Williams has 2 of those 5. If this usage continues, he's going to continue being a very, very good fantasy asset. My rest of season rankings continue to like Kyren more than the market does. Now, I talked about Sam Laporta earlier and how he's crushing it in fantasy football. Another rookie tight end who's doing really well is Luke Musgrave. It's just that his production hasn't totally been there. Musgrave has yet to score more than 10.9 PPR points in a game this year. That came in week 3. But he's seen the 6th best route participation at tight end to start the year, and his 15.8% target share is top 15 at the position. I still think that he's someone that you have to have rostered moving forward. The last trend this week is about Adam Thielen. He was someone that I featured on last week's Sleeper Show, and he was fortunately one of my hits. Don't worry. I'm going to call out my misses on that episode too. But Thielen has now seen a 29% target share and a 25% target share over his last 2 games. He's seen 23 targets during this time. This week, he gets a revenge game against the Vikings. That's a beatable defense. After the Vikings, they get the Lions, Dolphins, Texans, Colts, and Bears. I don't think Thielen's going to continue this, but he should be pretty usable. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. We got a show tomorrow, The Sleeper Show. I'll talk to you then.